Good afternoon, QA engineers, SDATs, or those who are planning to become one soon. I know, today I look sharp, but the questions are going to be even sharper because we're about to start or kick off an interview preparation video with one of our YouTube subscribers who asked me if we could record another video of the technical test automation interview prep or mock interview. And I said, why don't you join us if you already have experience and I'm gonna do it with you. So here we go, the guy from Europe, but the questions are going to be from the United States, the latest questions that our students did receive whenever they would go for a QA automation position or an SDAT. So we're about to kick it off, but let me remind you, who is this guy? My name is Sergey Kromchenko. I'm a software QA engineer, lead manager, and a senior engineering manager of SDAT in the past. But these days, I'm helping people like you to become a QA engineer or to improve your existing skills. Now, we're going to kick off this video for those folks who will hit this big fat thumb up button below and also subscribe to our channel because you do not want to miss such as useful content as interview preparation, tutorials, or success stories from the people who never had any QA experience but quickly became one after going through our bootcamp. Just like this guy right here. Alrighty, let's kick it off. Let's get started. Thank you, Istvan, for joining us. And finally, we're recording video with the first YouTube follower of ours. Not the first one, generally speaking, but the first one who is taking a part of the interview. So I want to thank you for that. And I want to ask you to tell us about yourself. Who is this test automation engineer from Europe and how did he find us?
My name is Istvan Mate. I'm a test automation engineer, or as that I would say, since 2018. I have worked in like different industries, from healthcare through banking and other industries as well. I have been doing manual and test automation as well.
By the way,
Also, yes.
quick thing for future improvements. Whenever you're answering a question, even on Zoom, try to sometimes watch the person to catch an eye contact. Otherwise, I might think that you're reading from somewhere all over the place.
Yeah. Okay. I'm a bit nervous.
Absolutely, no pressure. Probably it feels like actual interview when you are nervous, right? But no pressure at all. It's just a friend's conversation. I want to hear your story, and all of these YouTube subscribers who are going to be watching this video and subscribing to our channel, they want just to hear your story and they want you to share your experience because they did not have such experience. Only you had it.
And how I found your YouTube channel. Basically, I try to improve, all the time, and I try to like find good YouTube channels, also like good blogs, and this is the way that I found your channel, and I think it's pretty cool with many interesting topics, and it's very pleasant to hear your voice. I think that is important.
Awesome. And I think you've left us a comment before I've answered you on a YouTube. Were you the person who said that thanks to our videos, you found a job, or was it someone else?
It was someone else.
Got it. Okay, what was your comment? How did we end up recording this interview? Because I don't remember already.
Yeah, I think I watched a non-technical video of yours, and I think it was quite good. But I think it's more important to tackle the technical questions. And I wrote a comment that video would be great with the technical test automation, or even like as that questions. And I got a comment reply from you, and basically this is the way that we got here.
Oh, nice. That's cool. Yes. So I said, well, if you want to do it, let's do it together.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And actually, before this interview, we did record one link for which I'm going to live right here with Lucas and Abdullah from Brazil and Pakistan, Pakistani and US guy. Cool. Okay, in this case, let's get started. We're going to go through the interview questions that you had throughout your experience, and also I had some of them. So I've gathered them into one poll, and I'm going to share them with you. So I'll ask them, you answer, and if you would like me to answer some of them, feel free to drop them back on me, and I'll do that. Otherwise, we're gonna try to concentrate on a technical part, but we'll also go through some theory that I don't really like, because in the US, actually, that's a big difference between Europe. In the US, they mostly ask you about your experience and situations. In Europe, they do ask a lot of questions about theory, pretty much book questions, right? Like, hey, what is regression testing? What's the difference between white box testing and a black box testing? I remember I've been asked the question once, like, what is regression testing? And I've asked them, hey, who's that person who came up with this question? I'm pretty sure that person is not from the US. So first one, what is a difference between priority and severity?
Severity means how critical the issue is. Priority means how important that is. So I can tell you an example for like both of them. Like, for example, high severity, low priority is a functionality which is like crashing, but it is like rarely used. So users like don't even use it like that much as, for example, a login functionality, and that's why it like because it is crashing, it's quite severe, but like no one uses it. That's why it's low priority. And for
Got it.
example, vice versa, like low severity and high priority is, for example, a typo in the, I don't know, like
On the Apple
marketing banner.
website.
Sorry?
On the Apple website, apple.com typo, right?
Yeah. For example, that. So that is like low severity, but it's a high priority. And I think based on these examples, it's quite easy to understand the
Absolutely.
differences between those.
Yeah, absolutely. So pretty much priority is how fast, how important it is, or how fast it gotta be fixed. By the way, I do get a lot of calls from our YouTube subscribers who are saying that, hey, I went through some shitty bootcamp and I could not get a job, and if I would know that you exist, I would not go for another bootcamp. So here we go. What I'm going to offer to you right now, if you are interested to learn QA from scratch or to try our bootcamp as a manual QA engineer, not automation, you can spend one entire week for $20 to learn basics of QA and get an internship in a US-based startup with us. Second of all, if you want to switch from the manual QA or automation engineer, or if you want to improve your skills and go through up to 84 rounds of interview preparation within 3 months and a half throughout the test automation course, you can do it by scheduling a one-on-one consultation with me so I could simply answer your questions. All right, let's continue. What is a difference between performance testing and a load testing? And actually, I'm going to add one on the top, and stress testing as well.
Mm-hmm. So basically, stress testing and load testing, those are both like performance testing types. So they are like superset of the performance testing term. Load testing is when you are basically trying to pretend the real world load on the software that you are working on. So like the amount of users, which is basically the concurrent threads. So the most important thing is that you want to achieve like real world usage, and that's what load testing is about. I'm not gonna go into details because we have like a lot of questions. And the stress testing is, I think, if I'm not mistaken, when you achieve a load on the system where it breaks. But maybe I'm not right about it.
Yeah,
Please
you're right.
correct me.
Yeah, you're right. I can correct you, but you're definitely correct. So performance testing is how does the application act under expected load. Load testing is what is a pretty much answer the question, what is a load where performance is going to start degrading a little bit? And stress testing, as you said, when is it going to crash? We're going to go all the way up until the death of the server. That's pretty much it. So yeah, you're absolutely correct. By the way, I think you forgot to hit that big fat thumb up button below, subscribe to our channel, because you do not want to miss such as useful content as interview preparation, tutorials, and success stories from people who never had any experience or just decided to improve their existing skills. Just like myself, I was a farm boy, and you can see my story right here. Alrighty, let's continue. Next one, how to test a login page. There was a button to change the language. How to test a login page. Can you give us more details on this one?
Yeah. So you have to check positive scenarios, negative scenarios as well. You have to check SQL injections, for example. But it is quite important that, for example, if you are writing automation tests or manual tests, you are testing positive, negative cases, but you don't have to check all of those on each of the languages because it doesn't make sense. It's just like translating the text on the buttons and etc.
Exactly.
So you have to check for special characters. You have to check for the empty fields. You have to check. There used to be remember me button. Also forget password. So all these stuff have to be checked. If you have anything on your mind.
Yeah, I think you said it right. So first of all, we always check the happy path. And by the way, for those people who have never heard that phrase before, happy path is the only or the happiest path of the user. Pretty much, if it's a login page, you type in existing user's email or username, existing user's password, and you click login button and verify user was able to log in. So that's the happy path. And then from there, we go to negative cases, fraud inputs that we can possibly have. I mean, as you mentioned, we're not going to go into all of them, but number one, we verify the user is not able to log in with the incorrect password. We also verify that the user not able to log in with incorrect username or email. We can also think of the email validation and field requirements. Actually, before we answer any type of questions about how would you test something, we should always ask for requirements. But since this was a question from your experience, you already had requirements on your mind. But generally speaking, you always double check, hey, what are the requirements for this page? How many fields do we have? What do we accept? What's the length? What's the min and max length of each field, such as password, username? Do we have reset password button? Do we have to check that as well, etc.? Because based on requirements, we can expand the amount of test cases. But if we have, as you mentioned, just a username and a password, we would also think about the field validation, such as do minimum, min, max, pretty much boundary testing. Then email validation. Do we accept fields without, I don't know, without an extension or without @, etc.? There should always be an email validation. And I think that'll be it. Try empty fields because Microsoft did have a bug long time ago at the beginning of 2000s, I believe, where if you would put no email, they would count it as an admin credits for some reason. They will let you log in as an admin, and that was insane. And that should probably be it. And the next one, HTTP methods. So API. Can you please call HTTP methods that you're familiar with?
So, for example, most popular ones are get, post, put, delete, and also there are different more patch options, head probably, but I have never used them.
I don't think
Um,
anyone is using head or at least from my experience from a decade in the QA.
mhm.
Sounds good. All right. So we've got those. And what is a difference between them?
So with get, you are basically only getting information. With post, you can also update or create a resource. So when you, for example, want to put something into the database or you want to update something, then you are using post. Or you want to handle sensitive information, you also use post because in get you don't have the body and everything is going into the URL. Then there's delete. With that, you can basically delete resources. With put, you can only update a resource, but also with post, you can
Mhm.
update, right?
It depends how they set it up. Yeah. Usually, your post should be the one that creates it only. But yesterday, I was helping one of our graduates to go through the interview coding challenge, through the homework coding challenge, and we were automating website for one of the electric car companies in the United States. And we were playing through the browser with their APIs, and I saw that they did use post request to get data. And I was like, why? Why? If you guys know why, please leave a comment below and tell me, because I have no idea. And also, regarding the question about testing a login page, I'm pretty sure there are a lot of different ways to test it. You can intercept the API call and change the data, et cetera, et cetera. You can do a lot of things. Let me know what other options do you guys have. How would you test it as well? As soon as I started teaching and mentoring people 7 years ago, I have learned so much more than I knew before. Trust me, because every single student would ask, "Hey, what's the difference between those two?" I'm like, "Let me come back to you." So I've learned like 3 times more than I knew before I started mentoring people. And the difference is, by standard, put is updating an entire resource or entire object. Think of it as when you want to update user information on on your user account page. You are updating every single field. And if you want to update one field, that'll be patch. It's like a little patch, And not you're not updating entire object or resource. You're only patching small thing. So updating a username or just the first name, etc.
Yeah, so basically it's better to use patch because it's more lightweight and performance-wise is better, right?
Yeah, absolutely. But devs do such a different things, such a weird things that a lot of times as I mentioned, you'll see getting information with the post request and just mind blowing, in my opinion. Cool. Let's move forward. That's a question from you. Such an interesting question. How do you know that login validation is done on a backend and not on a front end? I read about it and I'm like, okay, I guess it's this way, but let me hear your version and then I'll give you mine.
Basically, my first thought was to like open, DevTools in Chrome, for example, and you have to check the request there. And based on that, you can decide if it's done on the backend or on the front end. And of course, it should be done on the backend. So you have to find a request which is matching that.
Yeah, absolutely. Same thing. I would look into network tab and see if we are sending API, if we're sending username password, if we're getting the access token back, because that's the standard. That's how it's usually done. And why in the world would someone put the login validation on the front end? Only devs who never done development can probably do it just because they want to get it done somehow, at least somehow that it would work. But it's not secured at all. The only one way I could think about it is you could possibly hash it or encrypt it and then store it in the local storage. But still, if you do the validation on the front end, that means the code that checks it and actually encrypts your username password to match that hash is going to be stored also on the front end, which means that anyone in the world can see that your entire hashing system or encryption system, which does not make any sense.
Mm-hmm.
So let's move forward.
Yeah.
Why is Agile better than Waterfall?
In Waterfall, you have to uh, specify the requirements in the beginning of the project. And for example, the development takes like 2-3 years. After 2-3 years, the customer says that this is not what I wanted.
Goodbye.
And like a lot of money went into the project, etc. And also, in the like nowadays, things change quite rapidly. So I think that's why, like, not sure if everybody, but I think like most of the companies are working in agile, and that is basically ensuring that there's like constant feedback about the
Mhm.
development, if it's going into the right direction or not. So I think that that's the most important differences between those two.
Absolutely, absolutely. They have their pros and cons, and I definitely agree that Agile is better for more modern startups because we want to change quickly. Just like modern kids, we change quickly, we adapt quickly, we want to move forward as fast as possible. In order to do that, we have to change our priorities at ASAP, not waiting for a year and then realizing that, oh, our customers are already using somebody else's product. Goodbye. But it still works for military, for banks, for government, and that's why they are much slower in. If you look into banking system, it's the least developed software product in the world, I can say, especially American. In the United States, oh my goodness. If you look, I was born in Ukraine, and if you look what they do there with the banking system, it's insane. It's quite modern and very much up to date. But in the US, oh, that's. By the way,
Sorry,
guys, tell me from whichever country you are, and tell me how does the banking system software look like in your country in a comment below so we would know. I'm pretty sure there are a lot of people from India can tell us how great it is or how bad it is.
but by the way, I thought that in the USA it's like the the opposite way. So it's more like nature there, but then yeah, looks
It,
like not.
yeah, it's quite old, but it's stable. It's somewhat stable, but quite old. I can say they don't have such a lot of cool things that they do have in European countries. And even sending money from card to card. Someone have developed an app called Zelle where you can send money from app to app. It's just like a PayPal, but within a banking system of the United States, where you can send money from one bank account to another bank account, but you do have to install set up app called Zelle. And for example, in Ukraine, you can send it from card to card regardless of the bank, just using the card number, your debit card. You use it and you can send it to anyone that quickly.
Wow.
Yeah, and also there are quite a lot of things such as when the war started, they have created they call it a jar. Pretty much, you create a jar, and everyone can donate money to your jar directly. You just give them a link, and people can use their cards to drop the money. It's something similar to GoFundMe in the United States, where you can create an account, people will drop the money, and then from that account, you're gonna have to transfer money to somewhere else. But it's a completely different company, GoFundMe, and in Ukraine, they do offer it within a banking system. I'm not a fan. I mean, that's a separate political story. I'm not going to get into it. You guys let us know what do you think about your country's banking system, and we're going to move forward. How to select an input field with Selenium and type in something into it. Oh, wow. Okay, we're going to touch some of the technical automation stuff with Selenium and Cypress here, it looks like.
Yeah, I mean, I got these questions, but I think these are things that you just Google and immediately. But this one is quite easy. So like you have the driver, you use the function find element, driver.find element, and in the brackets you type based on what you want to find that element. So for example, by ID, um, and then if you have that, then you continue it with dot send keys function, and you type the desired string there or whatever you want.
Mhm. Yep, absolutely. That makes sense. And let's see, how do you check a checkbox with Cypress and check if it's already checked? Looks like
Mhm.
those were questions that you get once upon a time in Europe.
So I think I found like different ways to check it. So I think in Cypress there's like function to check a checkbox, but also I think you can check it with the click function
Yeah.
function. And how to check whether it's checked or not. You have to not. I'm not sure what is the function, but in the brackets as a string you have to type should be checked.
Yeah, exactly. Just a assertion of of being checked. Absolutely. I just double checked it in Google. Aside of that, if you want to do it manually, you can simply get attribute and verify that there is a value, I don't know, whatever it is, because it will change from one of the values will change from false to true usually, and you can double check that as well. But Cypress does have ability to check that through the should assertion. All right, now so test strategy versus test plan. Do you include manual testing and performance testing in it?
correct me if I'm wrong. I think you should include like manual and performance testing into both. But it also depends on the application, like
That is true.
how important the performance is. But I think like nowadays, if you don't have good performance, then users are going to use a different application because
Absolutely.
nobody wants to wait.
Yeah. We're too fast to wait these days. Difference between system and user acceptance testing.
System testing, you have to check it from like a technical perspective, whether everything is working properly, and developers are basically doing that, like testers. And user acceptance testing, that is what I read, that is basically done by the end users. However, I think this is not like this at every companies. Not
Hmm.
sure what is your experience regarding these two. And also I find like a good example. So regarding a car, for example, system testing is to check whether the engine is working properly, the brakes are working properly, etc. And UAT in terms of this is like, for example, the the end customer is driving the car and whether it feels good, whether it drives good, things like that.
Exactly. User acceptance. Does user actually accept the application? That's what it answers. Awesome. Thank you. And let's move forward. How would I report test results to stakeholders?
The most important thing regarding test automation and manual testing results is the pass fail ratio. You have to report that. In terms of automation testing, you should have some kind of report. For example, I always used Allure, not always, but like 90% percentage of the time I used Allure reporting. I think
Mhm.
it's quite great. You have nice graphs, etc. So you show that report. There's also the time, how long the test took to run, mm, and of course, um, regarding manual testing, you have to say like how many bugs you found, and also the fail pass fail ratio. But
Yep.
what do you think about this?
Oh, yeah, it makes sense. It makes sense. I would also probably add data stats based on what those digits were in the past. I mean, maybe that's what you meant in alert that within the last year, every single month we had that amount of bugs in I don't know in a in the QA environment, and then the amount of bugs in a production environment. Our automation did cut this percentage of them in test automation before it even got to QA environment. For example, when devs ran our test, I would include that so the stakeholders could see the improvements that your team does that gradually, so that we are catching more and more bugs. Because if you show them stats, they'll ask you, okay, what can we do to improve those stats? So it's better to come with the prepared information already and show them that, hey, we did increase the amount of tests, automated tests by this, and this did help us to catch that many more bugs in a pre-prod, in a QA environment, or whichever staging environment you call it, or even devs, because it also depends on the where does your automation run. Do devs run it in their team environments or dev environments, or do you only run it in a QA environment? But generally speaking, it's an idea to prepare a good looking stats and graphs for them so they would clearly see what we've done in the past as a QA team and what did we improve until now.
Yeah, basically the trend is also quite important if we are improving or not.
Absolutely. They care about the business. They care about improving the quality of the product and how everyone can make more money on it pretty much. But let's be honest. What would you automate first? That's a good one. That's a good question for every test automation engineer as that, etc.
I would automate first the like tests covering the critical functionality of the application or of the software. I think that's the most important stuff. And also you have to have like a smoke test suite as soon as possible, which means that when you are like when devs are merging something into main, then you are running these smoke tests and you know whether it is stable enough or not. If they,
Exactly.
they, I would automate first the most critical functionalities, and then if I'm done with that, then I would go like into like more detailed stuff. That's I think how
Mm.
I think that is a good strategy.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, start with the most repetitive tests such as smoke, regression, and then those that are hard to test manually, but if you automate them once, you're going to forget about them until the rest of your days. And the most critical or important logic for the business. Absolutely. Test data creation. How do you create test data for your automation tests?
So it's quite important to have like similar to world data. And for that, there are like different libraries. For example, Faker. I used that in the past. So with that, you can have like, yeah, like real world examples.
Yeah, that's a great topic because I did go through quite a few levels of improvements throughout my life. As everyone else, I've started manually creating data and then depending on it. So that creates pretty much dependency on your test automation, and you don't want to do that. And then I realized that, okay, you can create that data through the API beforehand. So that you and while I have mentioned, actually, while I brought up that initiative, one of the senior as that said, well, why shouldn't we create data through UI so we would also test data creation through user interface? And we've ended up not doing that because there would be overhead for no reason, because there should be a separate test for every single piece of functionality, but only once. We don't have to reuse helper methods to create data for no reason through user interface because it's a waste of time. For example, login takes 1 second through API, while it takes 5 seconds through the user interface, 5 to 10 seconds. So it's like 500% improvement. Crazy, right? So I brought up that initiative to one of the companies, and we have converted because the company had a lot of issues where different people, we had about 5 to 10 QAs, they would use same data that was already created in a database in a different test. And whichever test runs first changes the data, the other one gets messed up. And it would be so flaky. And we had 500 tests, and I would be the one who would try to figure out what's happening. So we've converted those. We've created API helper methods to create data for beforehand for every single task. So every single task became isolated. And that's an ideal case when your task doesn't have any dependencies at all. So the worst way is to manually create data, depend on it. The second better option is to create data through API and kind of isolate it. Third option, to see data directly in a database. It can also be awesome fast because you're not even making a call to API and then it goes to the database and then it comes back to your server and then it gets back to your browser or Cypress, Playwright, whatever you're using, or Selenium. You directly sitting data in the database. I have not done that because you have to account that any type of API logic change that is related to data will possibly change the way or the place where the data is stored, and your direct calls to the database, your SQL queries will get messed up, and you're going to have to figure it out. You're going to have to match changes that developers are making on a server. And that's not the best way, in my opinion. That's why I do not prefer to use direct SQL queries into database, but the best way is to mock data if possible, unless we're talking about end-to-end tests where we actually have to test the entire system. You can also mock data, and that would be the fastest way because you don't even make any calls. You simply fake that data. And by the way, I'm going to attach a video that I created for the mocking data right there. Cool. Let's move forward. Sync versus async. Ooh, tell me about it.
So when you have like synchronous communication, the tasks are like done each after the other one. So, for example, you have 3 tasks, then when the first starts, then the second doesn't start until the first finishes. So it is going like sequentially through each of the tasks, each of the lines. Uh, and this can be like, take like more time. Um, and the asynchronous is basically when you have 3 tasks, then when the first starts, the second doesn't wait until the first finishes, the second starts, then the first starts. And like in the future, they will finish, the response is going to be received.
Thank you. Yeah,
Not sure.
async is a great option for API calls because you cannot you cannot simply do anything until the API call comes back. So that's why we have to use async and wait for it to come back. That would be probably the best example of async. All right.
And do you know like examples like where both of them are like make sense to use?
I mean, lately, not really. Everything is becoming async await in the world of JS, as far as I know. WebDriver IO was the last one, as far as I remember. Maybe there is something else that I haven't heard of. WDIO was the last one to keep both versions, sync and async, but they've realized there's going to be a lot of maintenance based on the Node.js updates in the version 20 something. So they have decided to drop the sync version and continue only with async, the way Playwright does it, the way Cypress does it behind the scenes. Cypress shows everyone that it's sync, you don't worry, we take care of everything, you simply run a command, but behind the scenes, it's also async.
Mm-hmm.
Which do you like the most, front end or back end testing, and why?
So I like better front end testing. I think for me at least, it's better because you see what you are doing, and also I'm more of a like UI person than a backend. But I don't have problem with backend test automation either. I just prefer front end because you see what you are doing. I think it's also like a great challenge to check like why something is not working, to wait for the elements, etc. Yeah, I prefer front end testing. Like, what's your opinion on this?
I'm on the other side. I like back-end testing. I enjoy it absolutely, but I like doing things fast and as efficient as possible. And back-end is, if we're, in terms of test automation, API, you send API request, you get a response, you verify it, game over. When you have to play with selectors, Jesus Christ, some of them are lower, faster, they're flaky, your tests become flaky. But with API, request, response, verification, game over. Love that.
But those can also be flaky, right?
Everything can be. I'll give you a story of one of the most interesting flaky issues that I found. I've talked about it on the previous Ask That Technical Interview Questions video, where my my devs told me that customers brought the issue that users once in a while fail to log in with the correct username and password. And I was like, why in the world is it failing? I've tested manually 10 times, works fine. Next week they come back again. Hey, random user told us we couldn't log in, but right after you could log in. I was like, what the hell? I've tested 10 times, works again. Then they came back again. I was like, okay, let me write down automation. I wrote a task to log in a loop, and ran it 100 times. It would, for the first 100 times, it would fail on 30th or something like that. For a second time, 50th or 60th, like that. I told my devs, when I tested manually, it works fine. I have no idea, but on some random run, it fails. And they started digging into backend, and they did have some async issue, I believe, where it could randomly fail a login. And I was like, okay, so that means I didn't miss the bug. You guys made it so tricky that I just couldn't catch it. It doesn't make sense to run login 100 times or any kind of piece of functionality on the website you're testing 100 times, because it will take an enormous amount of time to test every single API 100 times on a row. It does not make any sense. But that's probably the only flaky issue that I had with APIs throughout my experience with a decade. of experience.
Wow,
But
nice.
but UI is something that majority of people, our students, when they start working with an UI automation, they love it first, but then when they start working more with the selectors and the flaky tests, like, oh Jesus Christ, what happens here? I'm like, well, you probably have to check this and that and that, and maybe there's this. Maybe it's a front end. Maybe it just doesn't render on time. Maybe it renders slower or faster. Maybe you have to wait until the whole page is load. Maybe you have to intercept an API call and wait for that API response to come back to the browser and only then run it, because that API response contains the data that will be a part of this element. So yeah, there are quite a few tricky, there are probably hundreds of different reasons why your UI test can be flaky. And for the API, I've encountered only one, and that was devs, flaky devs.
Yeah, for example, I had one issue when I was working on UI test automation, and it was, I think, stale element exception. Not sure if you have heard about it, and it was like nothing changed on the UI, but in the background the table refreshed, I think,
Oh.
and it lost the the locator, I think, and
Mhm.
then like I was working on that like multiple hours, like figuring out what is the issue. I see the table, nothing happened, and but it refreshed.
Rendering. Yep. Yep. I did have something like that in the past as well, where it would render a couple of times. It would render first, it would show the locator, and then when that time it was WDIO or maybe Selenium that I've used, I would try to click it, but that time it would re-render it again, and that selector would not be clickable. And I was like, what the hell? It waits for it to be clickable, it shows me the true, and then it fails. And when I remember that I did write another if check, that while you're right before clicking it, check if it's clickable again. And when you check it for the second time before you click it, it was not clickable. So, oh yeah, then we found out it was double rendering or double loading for no reason.
Mhm.
Also, flaky devs. Let's blame devs, guys. Cool. Should we automate everything?
I don't think so.
I would love.
um yeah, there are like different tests which basically doesn't make sense, or like, yeah, it's not worth to automate, because manually like it's so much easier to test. And also there are like different tests which cannot be even like automated. I think I had an issue when I had to, I think, download or upload a file. I think it was up. Yeah, it was uploading, and I searched for it. I think we were using Playwright or Cypress, but based on the DOM, based on the element, like there was no functionality for that in Cypress or Playwright. So I asked the devs to put an element which is needed, and after that I was able to upload the file.
Nice.
So I think not every test should be automated. What is your opinion about this?
As a very positive person, I would love automate everything and never come back to it again. But unfortunately, there is no way, because usually there are some tasks which are very hard to automate and easy, very quick to test manually. So those should be the less priority, although they should still be on your list. There are some things that can, well, honestly speaking, everything can be automated, even CAPTCHA. But the question is, how much time are you planning to spend on it? So we should always pay attention to the amount of resources we have. I've set the goal once upon a time when I worked as a QA manager to automate 92%. That was the record. 92% of all the tests were automated. That was the record that we had. Never was able to get 100 for the reasons that I've just explained. But I think it brings another point that we can discuss: when should we automate? Because I worked for a couple of companies where we would automate things before they even come live. While software developers are creating new user interface and API, based on the tickets that they got, we would also create test automation for those APIs and user interface in parallel. First, I thought it's impossible because I could not imagine how can you automate something if it doesn't exist. By the way, guys, tell me in the comments below if you can imagine it now, because at that time I could not. I was like, it's impossible. It doesn't exist. How can you automate something that doesn't exist? But well, just like devs, you pretend it exists in your head or you put it on paper how it's supposed to work based on requirements. You write test automation. Yeah, you cannot add selectors. You put some dummy selectors until UI is ready. And when UI is ready, you update selectors quickly and run your test automation. Game over. Same with the API. And this also brings another secret that I can share with you guys. Whenever you are joining a company and they don't have stable selectors, or they don't have, or the majority of selectors or locators are not flaky, but dynamic. It's hard to find one. Thing number one you should do, you should always ask devs to add them whenever they're adding new features. You should try to enforce it. Thing number two, you can do it on your own. You can ask for permission to add it, even if you don't know how to do that. You can ask, hey, would anyone be able to spend a couple of hours with me or just an hour? Show me how that is done so I could invest my free time after hours when I don't do my job, because I want to become better. I want to become an SDAT if I'm a QA automation or manual QA. And if your company will do that, and by the way, if they have good managers, they will allow you to do so because they want you to grow. They see that you're eager to learn. And if you learn that, which I did in the past, then the next job you get, you're gonna get what was like 30% raise that I got after that. And I was like, whoa, I got a 30% raise just because I became a little smarter. So pay attention to that, guys, and get smarter.
Yeah, we also added like data QA attributes, and it was way easier to grab the elements. I think first the devs were doing it, but then after some time, we were also able to do that.
Mhm. No, that's the best case scenario. Absolutely. What do you think about Thread.sleep or pause or wait in terms of Cypress? But Thread.sleep is Java, Selenium, I believe. Is it okay to use
Yeah,
it?
no, I think it's not okay to use that. Yeah, in the beginning, I used it, but like in the first couple of months, I think, when I started to work as a tester. But yeah, I like quickly realized that it's not good, because the whole application like stops. And also when, for example, you are using Thread.sleep for 5 seconds, for example, and the button is visible after 1 second, it still waits until 5 seconds. So it could easily like, continue right after the element is visible. So doesn't make sense to wait that much time. So everyone should avoid using Thread.sleep. Maybe, when you are trying to debug something, you can use it, but never use it in like production code.
Absolutely. Fully agree with you. Fully agree with you. Next one is pretty interesting. Authorization. How do you test backend of authorization in a test automation?
I think it was like the question was different. How do I do it? Yeah, okay, sorry. Um, and when I was checking this, I think I realized that I wanted to say authentication, not authorization. I mean, by the way, that's also a very good question for interviews. Like, what is the difference between those two?
Let's talk about them and then answer it the way we want. Absolutely. That's a good one.
So one of them is like checking who you are. I think it's authentication, and the other one is checking what are your permissions, what you are allowed to do.
Mhm.
That's the difference between those two.
Absolutely.
And for this question, like how they do it in backend test automation, the authentication. So I
Or like in human language for everybody else.
I think I had a function to get the token. So in the beginning of all the tests, I ran that method to get the token, and then I just use that token in all the tests so that I save time.
Yep, exactly. You run it, you send API request with your username and password, get a response with access token, put it in the browser, refresh the page, boom, you're logged in. Easy peasy, don't have to waste time. What's the difference between double equal sign and a triple equal sign in JavaScript and TypeScript?
Not sure which one is which, but one is more strict than the other one. So when you are, for example, comparing like 5 as a string and 5 as a number, I think the double quotes is saying that they are equal. And
I think the double quotes they're ignoring the type, and the triple
yeah,
quotes
yeah, yeah,
verifying the exact type. So in this case,
yeah,
you compare 5 number as a number and 5 as a string. With the double quotes, it will pass. With the triple quotes, it will fail.
exactly. Yes.
Nice. Thank you. All right. And the last one, and the best one. What would you recommend as the senior test automation engineer to those people who want to switch from manual to test automation, or who want to begin their test automation path now?
Ooh, now when AI is gaining popularity, that's a very good question. I would say like how I started this journey. So in the beginning, I was working as a manual tester, and after a couple of months, I started to write automated tests with Java. I wanted to, get better and better, and I put in the hours necessary. Um, but one very important thing is that it doesn't make sense to, just go through the tutorials, just to watch them. I think it's much better to learn as you like practice. So, for example, you should build like a very simple application, like a to-do application. With AI, for example, it's quite easy. Then you have to build like very easy test automation frameworks to test that application. And AI can help with that if you don't doesn't under, if you doesn't if you don't understand something, you just ask the AI to explain. But I think I would do it that way, um, to to practice based on tutorials or like AI.
Exactly. Exactly. I fully agree with you that practice makes it perfect. I do get a lot of calls from people who watch the kind of this kind of YouTube videos, and they call me and say, "Hey, Sergi, I've tried to learn test automation on my own. I took like 5 Udemy courses. I've spent almost a year studying, and I'm trying to find a job. I cannot get a job because they always ask me a question about experience, and I don't have it. And I always fail. I'm very close to the job, but I never get it. Can you help me? Just maybe you can just interview me a couple of times to find out what am I missing." And usually I'm telling them, okay, guys, imagine that your experience is a one line right here. It's that's how your pure experience should look like, just a straight line with no holes. Your interview prep and experience looks like with a in between 100 points, you have 55 holes in the different places, and I have no idea where they are. I cannot patch them. I cannot send a patch request to fix that. The easiest way is to literally go through the full course. And number one, you will polish what you already have. Number two, you will fill out all the gaps that you have, which I have no idea about. One girl like that did call me a year ago. Then she was like, "Well, I don't know if I should do." And I told her, "Okay, we can do that if you want. I can go through as many one-on-ones with you as you want, but my time costs $250 an hour. You want to apply? You want to pay for it? Absolutely. 10 hours, 2.5K. 20 hours, you have paid for the full course of 5.5 months, or you spend 20 hours with me. What do you prefer?" Depending on the type of service I offer. But she ended up signing up for the course, and 2 months before, or maybe 1 or 2 months before she finished the course, she got a job offer. I'm going to record a video with her in 2 weeks, and when I come back to US, and I'll put it on the YouTube. But she got a job offer, and I will not tell you the title because you guys will not believe what title she got. She got about 100K, but the title doesn't look very usual for the person from the bootcamp. Either way, I'm just saying that experience is the key. in getting a job offer, because whenever you're gonna go for an interview, theory is amazing. You can get it for free on YouTube. You can get it for free right here. Even a practical interview experience, you get it here, except the fact that you're not getting interviewed by someone. But you do need experience and you do need someone to interview you. So that's why I'm going to put a smaller advertisement right here and say that, yo, guys, if you want to join our course, we offer experience from the day one in a US-based startup, and also throughout the full course, which goes for 5 months and a half, you will go through up to 136 rounds of interview preparation, which is mind-blowing. Awesome. On this good note, I want to thank you, Istvan, for joining us. Thank you for your time. It's a pleasure to interview people who watch us on a YouTube and share it with other YouTubers or people who watch us on YouTube.
Yeah, thank you very much for the opportunity. And I hope that this was educational for many people.
Absolutely, I can promise you that. And
that was quite a lot, I'll be honest. So I want to make sure that you guys will leave a comment right below this video. You will also drink some water. You will get a lot of rest. And finally, get some workout. Make sure you look good. You're not only smart and making a lot of money as the QA engineer. Alrighty, you have a good one. I'll see you next time.